The smirks on their faces when I announced I was quitting my stable job still haunt me. Flipping houses? In this economy? My brother-in-law couldn't contain his laughter. 8 months later, I sold that abandoned Victorian for triple my investment. Nobody's laughing anymore. Every morning at 7:15, I'd slide my keycard through the same scanner, take the same elevator to the same beige cubicle, and stare at the same mind-numbing spreadsheets. They called it stability. I called it slow death. My name is Stephen, and for 8 years, I was just another cog in the corporate machine at Meridian Financial. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me like a constant reminder that life was passing me by. My coworkers seemed content with their retirement plans and casual Fridays, but something inside me was screaming to escape. At night, I'd lose myself in renovation shows, sketching floor plans on napkins while my wife Jennifer slept beside me. There was something magical about taking something broken and forgotten and breathing new life into it. I'd stay up until 2 a.m. sometimes, researching Victorian architecture and restoration techniques, hiding my passion like some kind of shameful secret. Every day on my commute, I'd slow down at 1426 Oakwood Avenue, a once majestic Victorian home now standing abandoned, windows boarded, paint peeling like scabs from its facade. The for sale sign had been there so long it had faded to white. Something about that house called to me. I'd imagined stripping away the decay, restoring those intricate gables, bringing back the stained glass that once adorned its windows. I started taking different routes just to drive by it, like a lovesick teenager stalking a crush. Then came Black Friday, not the shopping kind. Our department was being restructured. I watched as Marcus, who'd been there 15 years, cleaned out his desk with shaking hands. Diane, a single mother, sobbing in the bathroom. I was spared the axe, but as I looked around at the shell-shocked survivors, I realized we were all just waiting for the next culling. That night, I couldn't sleep. The abandoned Victorian filled my thoughts. By morning, I'd made my decision. I withdrew my entire 401k, paying the penalty without flinching. The house was listed at $95,000, a steal if you ignored the collapsed roof and potential mold issues. I made an offer before even telling Jennifer. When she came home that evening to find me with a bottle of champagne and blueprints spread across our dining table, her eyes widened with both excitement and terror. "You did what?" She knocked the champagne glass from my hand. It shattered on the floor, the explosion of glass matching the tension in the room. "We have a mortgage, Stephen. We have plans." Her voice cracked as she grabbed my shoulders, searching my eyes for signs of a mental breakdown. 2 weeks later, at my in-laws' anniversary dinner, I chose to announce my career change. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my brother-in-law Dave, a successful real estate agent, let out a snort that grew into uncontrolled laughter. Flipping houses? In this economy? With what skills exactly? My father-in-law Robert joined in, choking on his wine. "You're throwing away a perfectly good career to play Bob the Builder?" My own father stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "No son of mine is going to become some handyman dropout." His words landed like blows. My mother's disappointed sigh cut deeper than any knife. Jennifer sat silently, her eyes fixed on her plate. The betrayal of her silence wounded more than their mockery. Dave slapped my back too hard, his wedding ring digging into my shoulder. "When you come crawling back begging for your job, make sure you're not tracking sawdust into the office." The room erupted in laughter, my dreams becoming the punchline to their cruel joke. I clenched my fists under the table until my nails drew blood from my palms. They had no idea what I was capable of. No idea at all. I thought the mockery at dinner was the worst of it, but that was just the beginning. The next morning I discovered Dave had been busy. 3 potential investors I'd been courting suddenly backed out. A quick call confirmed my suspicions. My own brother-in-law had told them the property was condemned, sitting on contaminated soil. "Just looking out for them," he texted when I confronted him. "And you'll thank me later." The bank denied my construction loan the following week. Despite my perfect credit score and solid business plan, they deemed the project too risky. I later learned my father-in-law, who golfed with the loan manager, had expressed his concerns about my mental state. "Stephen's going through something," he'd said. "Best not to enable this midlife crisis." I approached my parents as a last resort, asking them to co-sign a smaller loan. My father paced the living room, his disappointment radiating like heat. "This is exactly like when you wanted to be a musician in college. Impulsive, unrealistic." When I tried to explain, he raised his hand inches from my face. "You have a wife to think about. Responsibilities, not this childish fantasy." I left with their words ringing in my ears. "We won't help you fail." Even Jennifer, my rock, began to crumble under the pressure. I'd come home filthy from clearing debris at the house to find her crying on the phone with her mother. "I don't know what's gotten into him," she whispered, not realizing I was standing in the doorway. That night we had our first physical confrontation. When she suggested I take some time to reconsider, I slammed my fist into the wall, punching through the drywall. She flinched away from me, fear in her eyes, and I saw myself becoming someone I didn't recognize. My former colleagues were no better. Rumors spread that I'd had some kind of breakdown. Kevin, who I'd thought was a friend, texted asking if I was getting help. Melissa, our HR director, called offering resources for mental health support. They'd turned my passion into pathology, my dream into delusion. With investors gone and loans denied, I was forced to sell our second car and drain our savings. Jennifer and I barely spoke as our bank account dwindled. Each morning she'd leave for work without kissing me goodbye, the distance between us growing wider than the gaps in my Victorian's floorboards. One rainy Tuesday, I arrived at the house to find the windows smashed, fresh graffiti decorating the walls. A note was nailed to the door. "Give up while you still can." I recognized Dave's handwriting immediately. Something inside me snapped. I drove straight to his office, soaking wet and covered in paint chips. His secretary tried to stop me, but I pushed past her. Dave looked up, startled, as I grabbed him by his designer tie and dragged him across his desk, papers flying everywhere. "You stay away from my house," I growled, my voice barely recognizable. Security pulled us apart before I could do worse, but the look in his eyes told me I'd made an enemy for life. That night, Jennifer didn't come home. Her text was brief. "Staying at my parents'. Need space to think." I sat alone in our half-empty house, surrounded by renovation plans and maxed-out credit cards. The weight of everyone's doubt pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. Had they been right? Was I destroying my life for a rotting pile of lumber and broken dreams? Rock bottom came on a frigid December morning. 3 months into a renovation I'd projected would take 4, with only 30% of the work completed and 90% of my funds depleted. The heating system I'd installed had failed overnight, leaving the pipes to freeze and burst, flooding the newly refinished basement. I sat on the warped stairs, water soaking through my jeans, and for the first time I wept. Not quiet tears, but body-shaking sobs that echoed through the empty rooms. When I finally stopped crying, an eerie silence settled over the house. I wiped my eyes and looked up, really looked, at what I'd been too busy to notice. Behind the damaged drywall I'd been tearing down was hand-carved wainscoting, intricate patterns that told stories of another era. I stood, moving closer, running my fingers along the wood. Above it, faint outlines of a mural appeared, children playing in a garden that had long since been paved over. I spent the next hour carefully removing layers of cheap paint, revealing the home's hidden treasures. Under fluorescent fixtures hung forgotten crystal chandeliers. Beneath filthy carpet lay herringbone oak floors. This wasn't just a house to flip. It was history waiting to be honored. I'd been so focused on modernizing that I'd missed the soul of what I was trying to save. As I stood contemplating this revelation, a gruff voice startled me. "You're doing it all wrong, son." An elderly man stood in the doorway, leaning on a worn toolbox. Frank Jenkins, as he introduced himself, had been a contractor for 50 years before arthritis claimed his career. He'd been watching my progress for weeks, unable to bear my mistakes any longer. "You're trying to make her something she's not," he said, running his hand lovingly along the exposed beams. "Listen to what she's telling you." That afternoon changed everything. Frank became my mentor, teaching me to work with the house rather than against it. Restoration, not renovation, became our mantra. He knew craftsmen who could replicate the original fixtures, techniques that had been forgotten by modern builders. Most importantly, he believed in me when no one else would. I developed a new approach, preserving the Victorian charm while selectively modernizing for functionality. We salvaged original doors from demolished homes in the area, hunted down period-appropriate hardware at estate sales. I learned to mix plaster the old way, to repair rather than replace wherever possible. My hands, once soft from keyboard work, grew calloused and skilled. Jennifer visited unexpectedly one evening, 6 weeks into my partnership with Frank. She stood silently as I showed her the progress: the restored staircase, the period wallpaper, the stained glass we'd rescued from a church demolition. When I finished my nervous tour, she handed me divorce papers. "I can't do this anymore, Stephen. You chose this house over our marriage." I took the papers without a word, feeling strangely calm. As she turned to leave, a truck pulled up outside. The Historical Society president stepped out, bringing news that would change everything. Our restoration had caught their attention. They were considering the house for landmark status, which came with a substantial tax credit and grant opportunities. Jennifer's expression shifted as she overheard the conversation. For the first time, she saw not a midlife crisis, but a vision coming to life. She left without the papers that night, confusion replacing certainty in her eyes. I didn't chase after her. Instead, I returned to the half-finished parlor and worked until dawn, each hammer stroke more purposeful than the last. Word spread about the Victorian revival on Oakwood Avenue. Architecture students began volunteering their weekends. A local news segment brought curious visitors. Investors who had rejected me now called daily, offering funding I no longer needed. The house was speaking, and finally, people were listening. The completion took 9 months total, 5 months longer than I'd planned, but a lifetime shorter than anyone had expected. The final touch was installing the stained glass transom window above the front door, depicting a phoenix rising from ashes. Frank and I stood on the sidewalk that spring morning, admiring our work in reverent silence. The once-abandoned Victorian now stood proud, her gingerbread trim gleaming white against sage-green clapboards, brass fixtures polished to a mirror shine. The Historical Society organized an open house, inviting the community to witness the resurrection. I hadn't planned on inviting my family, but Frank insisted. "Victory tastes sweetest when shared with those who doubted you," he said, his weathered hand squeezing my shoulder. They all came, my parents, Jennifer and hers, even Dave with his plastered-on smile. They clustered awkwardly in the foyer, eyes wide as they took in the transformed space. My father approached first, his usual confidence faltering. "Son, this is—" He struggled to find words. "This is extraordinary." The admission seemed physically painful for him. My mother brushed past him, wrapping me in an unexpected embrace. "We were wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "So wrong." Her apology felt genuine, but came too late to heal the wounds her doubt had inflicted. Dave hovered by the crown molding, pretending to admire the craftsmanship. I approached him deliberately, watching him tense. "Beautiful property," he managed. "If you're thinking of selling, I'd be happy to list it for you. We could keep it in the family, so to speak." I smiled coldly. "That's generous, considering you told everyone it was built on contaminated soil." The color drained from his face. Before he could respond, I was approached by Eleanor Harrington, a wealthy preservationist known for her collection of historic properties. She'd been circling the house all afternoon, examining every detail with approving nods. "Mr. Stevens," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to make you an offer." The figure she named, just over triple my investment, caused a collective gasp. Dave's champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the restored hardwood. As he knelt to clean it, I leaned down beside him. "Careful not to track glass back to your office when you leave," I whispered, throwing his words back at him. Jennifer approached last, her eyes swimming with regret. "I should have believed in you," she said, her hand tentatively reaching for mine. I gently moved away from her touch. Some broken things couldn't be restored, no matter how skilled the craftsman. The sale closed a week later. I didn't immediately tell anyone about my next venture, purchasing not just one house, but an entire abandoned block in the historic district. Frank and I had formed a proper partnership, with a waiting list of investors eager to fund our vision. The City Council had unanimously approved our proposal for Jenkins and Stevens restoration, granting us historic preservation tax credits that would make the project not just viable but lucrative. I visited my parents for Sunday dinner, enduring their newfound pride with quiet amusement. "We always knew you had it in you," my father declared, rewriting history with breathtaking ease. My mother nodded enthusiastically. "You just needed to find your passion." I didn't contradict them. Their validation no longer mattered. As I left, my father pressed a check into my hand, the exact amount I'd asked them to co-sign for originally. "For your next project," he said hopefully. I returned it to him with a smile. "Keep it. I've secured my own funding." The flash of hurt in his eyes gave me no pleasure, only a sense of having come full circle. The final piece of my transformation came when my former boss called, offering to create a special position for me at Meridian Financial, heading up their real estate investment division. I thanked him politely and declined. Some viewed my success as luck or a fluke. They still didn't understand that I hadn't just restored a house. I'd restored myself. Today, as I stand before my next challenge, a forgotten Art Deco theater that the city had condemned, I run my hands along its neglected facade and feel that familiar spark. The crowd gathered for the groundbreaking includes many who once mocked me, now eager to associate with my success. Frank meets my eye and gives me a knowing nod. We don't need their approval anymore. The greatest revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. That abandoned Victorian wasn't just a house I flipped. It was the mirror that showed me who I truly am. And nobody gets to laugh at that.